Welcome, farewell fans, and I am back today with another great interview. And I have today Shawn Fry. Now, Shawn, we have talked about, not to great extent, but we have talked about the workaholics, right?
Yeah.
We talked about the and I think that's kind of what we resonated with,
Yeah.
because I spent a lot of time investing in being, as we will call it, a provider, right? And providing for my family and making sure that they have all the things that they need that I didn't have when I was growing up. Even though we know times have changed, so if we didn't travel as kids, we want to make sure that our kids travel, or we want to make sure that we have a nice house. They can do all the extra activities that we wasn't able to do, karate, basketball, anything their hearts can imagine, they can have.
That's right.
In short story, my son wanted this drum set. He wanted to play the drums. So one of my friends was giving away a drum set. I got him some drums. He played with it for all of 3-4 weeks. Had training classes, little training class, coaching classes, and everything. And he don't play the drums at all right now. Don't play the drums at all.
Yeah.
But it was unique to be able to provide that experience. And as parents, we want to be able to provide that experience, but it does come at a cost.
Yeah.
It comes at a cost. So, but before we dive deep into that, just to give everybody a synopsis of what we're going to talk about, Shawn, can you just kind of give the farewell fans, tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So MNG, it's great to be on this podcast. I'm a big believer in what you're doing with this podcast and the parenting and the growth, the personal growth.
Thank you.
Awesome. Right. Awesome. So that's really what I'm about. I've had 25 plus years in business transformation, right? So working with different facilities, 60 some facilities, 17 different countries, 4 different industries, and just spending a lot of time on the road, right? So I travel probably 50-60% of the time.
Yeah.
And the intent really, it does capture what you just talked about, right? Was, hey, look, I grew up in a I don't know. It wasn't poor, but I was a lower, less fortunate area, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure my kids and my family had everything that I could provide, right? I want to provide the best. So I was all about how to achieve success in business transformation. Learned all kind of great principles, and I'll talk about those in a book that I wrote recently. But anyway, it was just all about how do I provide the best possible experience I can for my family. But I did that at a cost, right? I did that at a cost, a very high cost. And like you talked about, I was a workaholic. So really sacrificing personal health, as well as special, that intentional special time with family and other people that matter most, right? So that's what I'm all about, is how to be intentional, how to be present, to where you can be successful, but don't do that at such a high cost from a health and a personal family experience. So I think that is a little bit about me, and we'll definitely talk more about that as we go forward.
So thinking about that for a moment, the moment that your son came to you and said, and asked you, where do you live? Which is a very profound statement.
Yeah.
Because it has so many different layers to it. It has so many, and clearly it was life changing, because you took that back. Now, how did that reshape your view on success?
Yeah, so just a little bit of context there. So I was thrown into a high stakes, high situation. A business was failing. They were less than 50-60% on time delivery to the customer. They were delivering defective product to the customer. And I love a good challenge. I was in my early 30s, and I was like, let's go. Let's make this happen. Let's turn this thing around. So I jumped in head first, moved my family across the U.S. to really address that situation, because again, I love a good challenge. I really did feel like I was called to do that as well at the time. But anyway, worked with the team, right? Worked with the team, spent hours upon hours. I was working 70, 70 plus hours, 70, 80 hours a week, turning around that flawed business model, working with the team, taking their ideas, implementing their ideas, and really working with the customer. But all at the same time, right? So I came home one day and my youngest son came to me and he said, Dad, where do you live? And that was just like a knife to the heart, right? So that just really just shook me to the core, right? I was like, okay, I am way out of balance. Definitely know I'm a workaholic, but this is gone too far, right? So it really sent me into being more intentional with my time and really deciding, how I'm going to live every day with purpose and conviction and passion, right? So, and how do I make sure and carve out time for those that matter most, my wife, my two sons, and make sure that I spend quality time, right? The presence. And, something you talked about, I think in one of your other episodes was being, absent fathers, right? So in some cases, I think there's some fathers that truly are just completely absent, don't want anything to do with the kids or the family. Other cases, I think the fathers they're absent because they're trying to provide the best they possibly can. That's really what I was there, but I realized quickly that doesn't work. That's not a good recipe for success, for legacy, my sons, my family, and anybody else. So I think it's just really key to be intentional with their time. And so that's where I really started to think about my perfect day, right? So in my book, it's called, Sustained Business Growth.
Mhm.
I talk about what's the perfect day look like, right? So what's my perfect day routine? And I think about, I've got to get my mindset right first, right? I've got to make sure that what is my purpose? What am I really trying to accomplish? What am I called to do? And then how am I, I do that through prayer and meditation, but also physical exercise, making sure I'm healthy.
Yeah.
So I can be present, so I can be effective at being a husband, being a leader. So the better I lead myself, the better I can lead my family and my team.
Mhm.
So I really just kind of laid out that perfect day routine to see what I would strive for every day. Does that make sense?
Yes. Now, I want to highlight one thing that you said in there, which is legacy, right?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about, leaving behind something, leaving behind impression on a child, leaving behind, when we talk about legacy, we're talking about leaving behind um, impression on a child, right? Because
Yeah.
we want our kids to go further than us. We want our kids to do more than us.
Yeah.
So when we have that absent time from a child, what happens is that the moments that you can affect them is no longer there. You know,
Yes.
those moments when they have their experiences that you can chime in on. Those moments when they have those experiences that you can show them something different, or you can resonate with their excitement.
Yeah.
So, for example, I took custody of my son when he was 3 years old, and I went to all his graduation, all his ceremonies, all his activities, all of that stuff. I was there for.
Yeah.
His mom, on the other hand, wasn't there for those big moments.
Mm.
Graduating from kindergarten to first grade, from fifth grade to sixth grade, from seventh grade to eighth grade, but she was at graduation for high school. And now he's in trade school. So for him, just that one moment
Yeah.
trumps everything else.
Wow.
But for a father, it's not the same.
Mm.
So when a father miss out on those pivotal moments, miss out on that contribution, I think it weighs deeper, especially on young girls, but also on young boys, because it's a teaching period, it's a molding period, and their
Yeah.
first role model should be their father. It's
Yeah.
not always is, it's not always is, but it should be their father. That's to be the person they look up to. So the person that should always come through and that's going to have the most impact is their father, especially on young boys.
Yeah.
So when we talk about leaving a legacy and having that absent time, you can't get that back.
You can't. You can't.
I spent 10 years working two jobs And though I was at some of my son's most important moments, I missed out on the very little things. And I think that's some of the things that we don't capture, because what we look at is we look at that, well, if I spent this money here, we went to the park and spent money, and that was fun. Yeah, that's shared memories. But what about the small things? What about going to the park? What about taking a small road trip to go see, to go to the beach, or to go see some anomaly, not anomaly, but some ancient thing, rocks in your state, a national park, something that will be unforgettable, and it doesn't really require any money, because kids doesn't associate time with money. Adults associate time with money, and they believe that because I spent money, I spent time with you. But sometimes that time spent could just be a distraction. Going to the movies, that's a distraction. It's not a bonding moment, it's a distraction. Taking them here and there is a distraction because you're paying for money. But when you take them to something scenic, you could sit there, you could have that conversation, you could bond, and you could build that trust and that rapport with your kid. So when we're talking about legacy, if you don't have that impact, in some cases, those kids can go astray, because your influence, your impact on such pivotal times during their life is not there, and it's gone. So I'm glad you said that and brought that up.
Yeah, that's really big for me is legacy, right? So my dad definitely left a legacy with me. He was a workaholic. He worked shift work. He did everything. I patterned myself really. I figured out I got the workaholism from him, right? but but he honestly was trying to do everything he could to do the best that he could with what he had. But when he did spend time with me, it was quality time in scenery. So we used to go fishing a lot, right? So we were in the outdoors a lot and that kind of thing. And that's where I learned to enjoy the simple things, right, in life. And he just really helped me just understand some basic life lessons through that time, right?
Right.
And so that's what I've tried to pass on to my sons, is just like I would take them fishing, and we would play golf, and just things to do together, right? And just what did they want? That's something that's something else that I've learned too, is it's not all about what I want to do. It's what do they want to do, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's something I learned early on too, is like, okay, I'm going to be intentional with my time. I'm going to spend quality time with them. I'm going to be present. I'm not going to say I was perfect by any means. My two sons are 24 and 21 now, and we're at a different stage, and I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But I was really trying to be intentional about quality time with what do they want to do, because at first I was doing what I wanted to do and what I thought they would enjoy, but it wasn't right. So it was really about what do they want to do, right? And it could be, I didn't really play much golf until, my youngest son's like, yeah, I want to learn how to play golf. And I was like, okay, we'll play golf. I'll figure it out. And so we played golf, and we all three, man, had a great time, and they like to play pool, so I like to play pool and, just be outdoors and stuff like that. So I think it's really, and you talked about vacations, right? Or just trips, and some of those can be expensive. so I can remember a trip to Disney World that really was expensive, but yeah, but it's time, right? It's that time that, it's experiences, and it's just being together, experiencing life together. That's tremendous, right? So it doesn't have to be expensive, though. It can be something outdoors, enjoying, hiking, or something outdoor, just go do something physical, right? So we actually like to work out together too, right? So I think that's really fun to, they've actually taught me stuff on the gym, best practices and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And that's the big part about it, is being able to learn from each other.
Yeah.
And that's how you get that growing period, because it's things that they are knowledgeable about, that, because things have changed from the times that we worked out, right?
Yeah.
Equipment has changed from the time that, we worked out. So, and best practice has changed as well. Some things stay the same, some things change, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that you did mention is playing pool. So I taught my son how to play pool.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, he loves to share with everybody. Yeah, I beat my dad. Yeah, I beat my dad
Yeah.
in pool. And I'm like, I don't recall that game. He like, nope, nope, nope. I won. I remember. I remember. We played on that table right there, and I remember it was. And he would go detail for detail about
Yeah.
he played. And those are the unforgettable moments.
Yeah.
As small as it
Yeah.
is, to me, I'm like, all right, I lost a game. I forget about it. But for him,
That was big. Yeah.
it was a big moment. It was like I
Yeah.
finally beat my dad at something.
Yeah.
And I gloat about it. So I just sit in there and be like, go ahead and bask in your glory, son.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and blast. but
Yeah.
but again, to go back to that point, yes, trips can be expensive, but those are, and I hate to keep hammering it home, but it's just so essential, even for parents even for fathers that are not in a home, that are with their kids on a weekend. It's
Yeah.
those little moments that if they willing to gloat and to share about it, it was so much more important to them than it was to you, and it didn't cost me a dime.
Yeah.
All,
Yeah.
all it cost
Exactly.
me was a little bit of time to come in the basement and play a few rounds of pool.
There you go. Yeah.
That was it. That was
Yeah.
it. Now, jumping to this next question. You've led, now as you stated, you have led businesses transformation across 60 plus facilities in 17 countries. Now, what are the key patterns that you observe in organizations that sustain success versus those that struggle?
Yeah, and I want to preface this too. So the lessons that I've learned through this business transformation can apply to anybody, especially parenting, right? So I'll try to make that connection, right? Because
Okay.
I think it can be, the principles can be successful in just about anywhere, any place, any business. But I think one of the main things that I've noticed about high impact transformational leaders is they are very good. They've mastered the art of decision making velocity, right? So they are able to come into a situation. They were able to assess. They talk to the people. They understand, the sentiment of the people around them. They understand data, right? But they take just enough information to make the decisions and go. Where many leaders that I've seen in many places, they delay, right? So they get in the midst of crisis, issues, whatever that might be, challenge situations, and they take too long, right? They're really trying to gather too much information, too much data. Some people will call it analysis paralysis, but anyway, the best leaders, they balance the right information, the feedback they get from their teams, and their gut, right? Their intuition, and they take action, right? So they don't wait. And so I think you can always pivot, you can always make a change and adjust where needed. But the key thing is just make a decision and go, but do it on the right amount of information. So I think it doesn't have to be a ton, but it's just the right amount. So that's one lesson that I've learned. So, and just FYI, I interviewed like 15 high impact transformation leaders across, automotive, aerospace, medical, finance, power generation, defense, right? So this is kind of, pooling information and best practices
Yeah.
across. The other one is they're excellent at prioritizing time, right? So they're very good about saying, where am I going to get the biggest return on time, return on investment, right? So they are excellent at taking, this is the amount of resources, we're going to put it in these areas, and we're going to focus instead of trying to do everything. So many people try to do everything and they don't do anything well, right? So these leaders are excellent at just distilling down where's the highest impact on, I like to call it return on time, and return on investment. So if I spend, resources, funds, money, that type of thing, they really know what's going to get them the best return. So I think that's something. So if I step back here a little bit and I tie it to parenting, right? So I think a lot of times, parents, and I've done this for sure, is I've taken too long to make some decisions like with my family that really shouldn't have taken, too much time, right? So whether it's a place to go, or whether it's do I spend time at and this is kind of blending both, return on time is, hey, look, instead of dealing with a critical business situation, I'm going to go coach my son's football team, right? Or
Mhm.
I'm going to go coach, one of their sports or something of that nature. So yeah, there's a short-term, problem that, if we build resilient teams, if we build systems and processes in our businesses, we should be able to do that. We should be able to go provide that, be more interactive and engaged in our kids, in our spouse's time too, right? So I think the better we understand, how to spend our time, return on investment, and to me, it's all about purpose. So if I'm only trying to make money, I'm going to make another decision. But if I'm trying to make a bigger impact and purpose on the people around me and live for legacy, I'm going to make a different decision, right? So I think it's just really key of understanding that purpose and how I tie that into, mastering return on investment, return on time as well. So those are two things that I would just really say. The third one is they're excellent about, instead of trying to do everything themselves, right? So, and I've definitely fallen, short in this area as well. Is I like to make sure it's done right, and I'll get in there and I'll figure it out myself, and I'll just go do it. That's not always the best decision, right? So it's really understanding what has to be done, and then who's the best person to do that. Who's
Right.
the expert? Who has tons of experience? They do this. I like to call it. It's their unconscious competence, right? So it's their
Right.
strength. They already know how to do it without even thinking about it. So they're good at finding the right people to do the right things the most efficient way. So
Okay.
those are three things that I would just say. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just to recap, so we're looking at making good decisions,
Yeah.
delegation,
Yeah.
and prioritizing your time to the right activity.
Yeah. That
Okay.
very good summary.
Okay. So if I can jump in on these. So now when we talk about delegation, now I can understand that.
Yeah.
And I like to and I'm guilty of that as well, because I like to delegate, but I also like to make sure that it's done correctly.
Yes.
And sometimes delegation can create empowerment. It can create trust, create a lot of things. So when you delegate tasks to, say, your kids or somebody else, it empowers them and knows that you trust them to make sure that this job is going to be done well.
Yeah.
But you can't get hung up on which is the controlling aspect of it, which is making sure that they do it the way that you want them to do it.
Yeah.
You have to be accepting of that they're going to do it their way. Now, I treat things like Grand Theft Auto. Now, I don't know if you remember when Grand Theft Auto
I
first
do.
came out, and it was a very violent game, but it was a great game. But one thing that I liked about Grand Theft Auto that no other game had on the market at that time that I know of, I want no gamers coming for me in the comments, is that you can achieve the mission any way you liked.
Yeah.
If it involved doing whatever to another character, whether you did it by a flamethrower, by car, by a grenade, whatever, as long as you just did it, that's all that mattered.
Yeah.
Other games, there was a particular way that you had to do it. If you had to go at a boss, you only had one way to do it. If it was a kind of like a hack and slash game, it was hack and slash.
Yeah.
If it was any other games, it was just, this is the lane that you have to stay in. There's no other way to attack. You got to come up with a strategy in this box, and that's it. This is just all you're working with. In GTA, it broke the box, and it was like, okay, well, here's the mission. Do it however you want to, as long as you complete it. I don't care how you do it, just complete it. And that's kind of how I kind of approach some problems, in life. It's like, okay, this is what I need to do. How many ways can I go about achieving this same thing? So if it came to, okay, for example, as we was talking previously, starting a podcast. If I want to start a podcast, how many different ways can I go about doing this? How many different platforms can I use? How can I achieve and grow an audience? What avenues do I have to do that? Because there's no one way to do it. So you start to break out of those parameters and start thinking on a broader spectrum of how can I do this, and not, okay, is it this the lane I'm supposed to be in, or is it this lane I'm supposed to be in to go ahead and achieve? There's no one path to get to that goal right there. So if we talk about prioritizing time is kind of difficult because sometimes you have more than one thing coming your way.
Sure.
And I can say that for projects at work is that, I have a project over here that I'm working on. The next thing you know, my boss is coming through the door and saying, hey, I need you to work on this project right here, whenever you get a chance. Okay, now I got to determine which one takes priority. Okay.
Yeah.
Just like with my family, if my son comes to me and says, well, Dad, matter of fact, this just happened. I wanted to go play basketball. My son wanted to change the alternator on his car. Now, as much as I love working on cars, I also love playing basketball. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't miss basketball and I didn't miss changing the alternator, but there were some other things happening that night as well.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that I got fulfillment out of the day, but I also made sure that he was taken care of as well. And we were able to get it done. Definitely after I played basketball, because I needed basketball that night. But we run into those decisions where we have conflicting activities or conflicting events, and then we're trying to prioritize and figure out, okay, are we going to be over here? Are we going to be over there? Like where? Like what are we going to do? And you really have to really dig deep and make a determination on what actually matters the most to you. What matters the most for your future? Does going into work, working this overtime on Saturday, trump spending time at the park with your child? Or going to see a recital, or going to see a play? Or does that trump the quality time and the building time for them? Because if you spend, just for example, if you spend all your time at work and your child is struggling, whether it's at school, whether it's in their personal life, whether it's with activities, and you only spend 5 or 10 minutes with them versus an hour, helping them get over that struggle, giving them confidence and everything, it makes a world of a difference by investing that 1 hour in your child versus 8 hours of overtime at work. And, and I get it. Sometimes it's mandatory and you have to do it.
Yeah.
But if you have the choice, you still got to find that time to invest in your child. Right. Yep. So, man, so talked about delegation, prioritizing time, and decision making.
Yep, that's good.
So with the decision making part, we all make decisions haphazardly.
Yeah.
Okay. We will shoot at the hip on decisions. And sometimes, and even with my son, he comes to me, he asks me stuff, and I say, well, let's think about this. What I like to do with my son is I want him to become more of a critical thinker. I want him to be a critical thinker.
Yeah.
So when he comes to me with stuff, I try to get him to kind of break things down. So this just happened yesterday, and this is decision making. He called me and said, Dad, we need toilet paper. We need some, house essentials. I said, okay. And I was like, well, I didn't feel like going. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to send you $40. Can you go for me? Now, this is also a life lesson in when you get your own household, you only have $40 and you need household essentials. How are you going to prioritize this? What is going to matter the most, right? So now, so we had to it was just hand soap, dishwashing liquid, and toilet paper. Okay. So simple things you would think, right? $40. Now,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
can tell you, I can get a lot with $40. Now,
yeah.
I oversent money. Oversent the money. It was more money than he really needed. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make this easy. I'm gonna send him the things off of Walmart that I want him to get.
Yeah.
So I sent him the links. Boom. And the prices. So it's like, okay. So he has a blueprint. He still turned around and said, well, how many dishwashers and liquor do you want me to get? And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, you got $40. Use the whole 40 or keep the change. I don't really care.
Yeah.
I sent you there particularly so you can make the effective decision. So you would know that when you have $40 and you're looking at prices, you know what to kind of prioritize your money at. Do you want to spend less on toilet paper and more on hand soap? Or do you want to spend more on dishwashing liquid? How often do you wash dishes? How often do you wash your hands? How many people come over to your house and they wash their hands? How fast is it going? How fast are you using the hand soap? How much tissue are you going through in a week? Like, I'm trying to get him to make and I know some people like, man, that's really deep. Like why are you sending him through all of that? But these are decisions that as
Yeah.
adults and ahead of a family that you make every day
You do.
without consciously thinking about it. And I'm trying to get my son to actively think about the money that you're spending
Yeah.
on these products. Are you going to be more of a brand person? So it was like, well, I need this particular brand tissue. Okay, so that means that you're going to go cheap on some of the other things that you're going to buy if you're more for this brand because this brand costs more. Like, how are you going to utilize this $40? And some people say, well, you could just go to the dollar store. Look, ain't nobody trying to get dollar store tissue. I'm just, I'll get the hand soap and the dishwasher liquid. I'm not getting dollar store tissue. I don't know why I'm doing dollar store toilet paper, but let
Not
me.
a good idea.
You're a brave person.
Yeah.
If you're doing dollar store toilet paper, you're a brave person. I can't. But I'm trying to get my son to think on a more critical level when we're talking about decision making, because when we're out there making decisions, sometimes, like I said earlier, we make it haphazardly and we don't see the consequences beyond the decision. So if we just take 2 seconds, and sometimes we gotta make quick decisions. Like you said, some leaders make decisions because it's a high volume job. So you're making decisions rapidly, right? And sometimes before you make a decision, a quick 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, let me think about it real quick. And you just you break it down and play it out. And that's what I can do with my son. Okay, let's talk about it. Okay, we have a decision here. What does this look like over time? Let's look at the consequences. Let's look at the pros, the cons. Let's look at the benefit. Who's the benefit more? Is the benefit you? Is the benefit them? Like, what does it look in the long run? When he decided to go to trade school, it was a big question. Like, okay, well, how much it pays when you come out? What is the school offering? Going forward, do they have internships? What does that look like? What does graduation rate look like? Because you want to get the benefit out of the decision in your favor. You don't want to make decisions where the benefit is not benefiting you at all.
Yeah.
So that's I just wanted to break this.
No, you brought up, you got me thinking about several other things too with my sons and what we were trying to do. And I will tell you, I was not a single father. My wife was, was a huge part. I mean, I have to give her credit for a lot. But I'm thinking back to some of the decisions, what we were trying to help our 2 sons how to make better decisions and the consequences, right?
Yeah.
So, especially in the teenage years, we're talking about, hey, well, who are you spending time with, right? And do they demonstrate the values? Do they actually, are they people you want to be like? Because you will take on their characteristics, right?
Yeah.
And that's the same thing for adults in other workplaces, right? But we were really trying to get them to think about the people they spend time with, the decisions they make, the activities they pursue, the things they get involved with, right? So you think about the consequences, so kids are faced with so many different decisions, and probably a lot more than we were when I was growing up. But just thinking about, just the things that are available to them. What do they put into their minds? What do they put into their body? What do they put in, the inputs, and making the decision to do that? And sometimes they don't think about it and the consequences that it leads to, right? So we were really trying to beat that, not beat them, but beat that mindset into them, right? Of just really think about what you're doing, think about where you spend your time, and what you put into your body, what's the consequences, what's that going to lead to long term. And then also you talked about what do they want to study going forward. So what does that lead to, and just get them forward thinking versus just making a knee-jerk decision. So yeah, good, man. That brought up a lot of great memories, so that's very good.
And you're absolutely right, because and I had to tell my son this, it's like, when you decide to go into a field, what is the growth of that field? And it's something that nobody thinks about, because when you look at colleges and universities, they have all these degrees that don't really have an associated field.
Yeah.
You know, you had all these. So when you're looking at what the growth looks like in this field, and if it's growing by like 1.5 year over year, oh, that's great. That means it's going to be a long lasting field. But if you have something that's growing 0.5 year over year, it's a slow growth trend. It's there, but how valuable is this job? How beneficial is this job going to be in the long run to your sustainability? Because, and I always try to tell them, like, if you have to look at the economy and what the economy is doing, because when you stray away from the economy, then what ends up happening is that you kind of lose touch of what's happening in the world, and you miss that inflation is rapidly increasing. And you start paying attention to gas prices. You start to wonder, like, man, why I got less? I'm paying for the same things, but I got less money in my pocket. But you're not seeing what the global economy is looking like. You're not seeing what one of my favorite classes was macro and microeconomics, because it really explained to you what happens in an economy, and that everything that happens on a big level happens on a small level. And we really need to pay attention to those things, because when we don't, what happens is we find ourselves in a whole load of mess, trying to figure out why my check is shorter for the same products than it was 3 months ago.
Yes. No, that's a great. My wife and I just talked about that just a couple days ago. We were talking, in eggs, right? So the price of eggs, and just different groceries and stuff like that. It was like, we didn't really buy anything, right? I mean, what is so
And Pharaoh fans, all of this relates to parenting, because you pass this knowledge down to your kids, and it's definitely knowledge for you as well, to just know that if you think on a deeper level, you could prepare your kids for what's going to happen next in their life, and they'll be able to see the trends that's going to happen. But
that's good.
I know I can go on a tangent sometimes.
No, it's great, man. It's great. Yeah, it's so true.
All right, so let me ask you. So, going back to our question, so many high achievers struggle with balancing ambition and family. How did you personally navigate that tension?
Yeah. So, and I get this question in my website sometimes, but I really went back to the book and really just started to distill down a perfect day routine. So again, I start my day out, hey, do I have enough rest? Right. So sleep is absolutely key. I just turned over 50, so it's really key. It's really key for me to figure out what I need to do to keep my health and my strength and agility, right?
Yeah.
So I think just defining the right amount of sleep, getting my mindset. I think mindset is 80% of the challenge, right? So I think we can definitely defeat ourselves before we even get started, right? So I think it's just being clear about what am I trying to accomplish, my purpose.
Right.
And then, I do some like prayer meditation to just try to reflect and make sure that my mindset is right. And what do I see going forward? And I think that just, and let me just kind of step back. It's kind of like Michael Jordan, of shooting basketball. How many shots did he take, right? I can't remember. It's thousands upon thousands, right?
Yeah.
And how many did he miss, right? But he visualized himself making the shot.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really what's key for us, is just visualizing what does success look like for us for that day. Making sure, diet, exercise, how am I keeping my strength up? If I manage myself well, if I lead myself well, then I can lead my family and my team well, right? So I got to start there. Purpose and focus. So I really like to carve out about 3+ hours of, just extreme focus. This is the work that's going to make the biggest difference. So it's really that return on time. The things that are going to make the biggest difference, I want to make sure and carve that time out and make sure it gets done. It's not always the easiest stuff. It's usually the hardest stuff, right? But it's going to get me the biggest, return. Networking time. So I like to make sure and carve out, who are the key people, the influencers that I need to connect with and work with to get things done, right? So, and then naturally family in the evening. I usually try to think about how do I spend at least, 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours of time, working with, being with the family, being present, doing what they like, right? And sometimes that's watching a movie, sometimes that's conversations, definitely dinner, and or, when, kids were younger, it was all about their activities. So it's just, whatever sports or that kind of thing was involved. So I think that's, and then financially, I think, I like to invest, so I like to keep an eye on the market. And so I usually, it may not necessarily always be daily, but at least weekly, there's a certain amount of time that I carve out and say, okay, how's the stocks? I like options. And so I just really kind of take a look at that. So I think it's just being very intentional, very, very focused on what do I need to achieve? What's my purpose? Being very intentional about what's that perfect day routine look like. And it could be perfect week. I talk about 7 powerful principles. I talked about, a little bit of some of that, earlier, but 7 powerful principles that most effective leaders do, right? So I really try to ingrain that in a longer term approach. But yeah, so hopefully that kind of answers your question or helps.
So I also want to take you back in time.
Okay? Yeah, sure.
Let me take you back in time. So if you could go back and give yourself advice before, hitting that breaking point, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think the advice that I would give my younger self is that, and I really did learn this through burnout and breakthrough, right? So I learned out in in the areas where I had the biggest crisis and just completely, drove myself into the ground. But I also learned it in some of the highest successes. Is just really keeping myself fit, right? And just keeping my mindset. And then how do I manage my energy? So clarity, resilience, and emotional stability, right? So those are just 3 things I would just kind of highlight. Again, just being clear, clarity, and then just resilient, overcome adversity, right? So things are always going to happen. Things are always going to go wrong, but being, decide in advance, I will overcome, right? I will get through this. This is a season, and don't let it just defeat us, right? So I think it's just deciding in advance, we're going to overcome this. I'm a big fan of an underdog, right? So underdogs have that grit, that motivation that they are going to win, despite the odds against them, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just that. And then that emotional awareness. So some of the best leaders that I've found too is they are emotionally aware of how they impact people around them, right? So I can definitely, lead with, dominance. I can lead with, just basically, command and control. But what does that really do, right? What does that really help the people around me? And if I think about that with kids, hey, look, I can be demanding, I can be very controlling, but does that develop their thinking, right? How
Right.
do I help them? How do I help develop their thinking for themselves, right? So it's really about questioning about what we talked about earlier is how do I really, help them think about consequences. So you have choices. Now there's something, let me just back up. There's some things, yeah, we have to tell them, you got to go do this.
Right. Yeah.
uh, but I think it's just about make sure that we're developing their thinking. So back, I kind of went off on a tangent there because I get excited, but um, I would just tell myself to be very clear, clarity. I'd be resilient and just be self-aware, right, of what impact I'm having on those around me. So
That's interesting. That's interesting. I, I'm gonna turn the question on to myself. When I wrote the question, I was like, man, that's a very good question.
it is.
Um, if I could tell myself, not before the breakup point, but if I can go back and tell myself when I took custody of my son, and coincidentally, taking custody of him also meant that I had to pay child support. I don't know how that related, but they're like, you got to pay child support. Why? But I had to pay child support, and that's what prompted the 2 jobs. I would have told myself, you know, once I got off of child support, if I was going to do the 2 jobs, take that money and invest it well for
Mm,
his future.
mm,
That way, all the time that I miss wouldn't be, I'm not gonna say it wouldn't be in vain, but it would have a greater value for his education. If he wanted to start a business, it just would have had more value to it. But I also would have told myself, like, you don't need the money as much as you need the time.
yes. Yeah.
And I will say that the job brought about more opportunities than if I probably didn't have it at all. But I would have more time with my son.
Yeah.
So there's a balance there that had to be maintained. But I think the primary advice I would say is to take that money that you're making and reinvest that money elsewhere,
Yes.
and watch it go tenfold,
Yes.
instead of
Yes.
just letting it just kind of sit and play with it. And I think that's kind of, we get caught up in those moments where it's like, okay, well, I have this extra money. I'm gonna go and hang out with my friends. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go and entertain somebody, or I'm gonna do all this. And you still spend time, and I still spend time with my son. But had I just took some of that money and just put it in the stock market, or put it in the stock, or put it in a CD, for growth. If I would have just did some of that with just a check or two,
Yeah.
2 checks out of the month, because we get paid every week there. So 2 checks out of the month, money goes away and it's going into an investment account, or
Yeah.
and then other money. Okay, well, I'll save it, or I'll do whatever. Just prioritizing the avenue of where that money went. When he decided to go to trade school, he could have had all the money to pay for it up front and
Mm.
wouldn't have to worry about anything. I mean, and it's still fine, but just thinking back, better decisions could have been made for his future, our comfortability, everything. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is one powerful strategy, from sustained business growth, that you wish more people apply in their lives today?
Yeah. I think it is live every day with intention, right?
Mm,
So I think it's just being intentional every day. And it could be even what you just mentioned, right? With my time, but with my money, how am I investing every day? That could be time, that could be money, that could be relationships.
yeah.
And so be very intentional. Live with purpose, live with conviction, and live with passion.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than people just going day to day, just kind of drifting through life, right? Not really having an aim or a goal or an objective, and just drifting, and whatever comes, that comes, right? So to me, it's just being intentional with passion, purpose, and conviction. And how do we develop others to do that as well? So I love leaving a legacy. So how are we developing our kids? How are we developing others around us? And other fathers. Again, I see you doing that, right? So I think that is just phenomenal of how you're really trying to invest in other fathers to leave that legacy. So that's what I would say.
Well, Shawn, one thing I want to definitely say is that I want to thank you for coming on to the show. I know the Farewell fans is going to really enjoy this one. This one was good. I will say this one was really, really good. But thank you. Any last words that you want to say before we go ahead and sign off?
No, I thank you. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate the conversations, the questions. Definitely good conversation, and really got me thinking in different ways. So I appreciate that. I do have some free resources at www.sustainedbusinessgrowth.com to help yourself or fans or whoever else might be needing that opportunity there. So it's just cash flow survival.
Okay.
But also some of the leadership lessons and growth assessment, right? So there's some free resources there, but also AI. So I dabble a little bit about how to leverage AI to help our businesses as well. So, yeah.
All right, Farewell fans, we will catch y'all on the next go around. Stay tuned in for the next interview. Peace.